So we left off with the hero stuck in the victim trap. They've seen the gap, they've gotten out of the knower trap. They've been able to recognize that there's a challenge before them or there's some opportunity that they could take advantage of that they're not. But in explaining the gap, they've defaulted into explanations that focus on factors outside of their control, which is what we call the victim trap. Remember, the statement is, why is this happening to me? And there's two sides to the victim trap, right? There's sort of the blame others side, where I look for others who have acted in ways that I can blame for my predicament, or they blame themselves. And in a sense, that's still out of control because they explain their situation by aspects of themselves they can't control. But either way, they're stuck in this sort of helplessness. And we found that get out of the victim trap is to ask the question, what's my next move? It brings the focus back into the things that I can control. How do I respond to the situation? And I can respond by creating mutual accountability. I can make decisions and take actions myself and hold myself accountable. And I can also create agreements with others or accept promises for others and hold them accountable for the promises that they make and the actions that they take. So we create mutual accountability is the middle path that takes us out of the victim trap. Once the hero's out of the victim trap, they're able to move forward and face external enemies, or the internal enemies. And in almost all of these stories, there's a moment where the hero can't move forward because of their own fears, their own doubts, and many times what we think of as their dark side. Campbell called this the dark night of the soul, where the hero really looks inside themselves and sees what they are doing that's holding themselves back. And there's a lot of symbolism with this. In Star Wars, there's the scene in the movie where Luke is on the moon with Yoda, and he's in the training sequence, and he goes into this tree that's strong with the dark side of the Force, and he believes he's fighting with Darth Vader, and he cuts off the head, and the head lands on the ground, and the face mask of Darth Vader explodes, and you see Luke's face. So the symbolizing that he's what holds himself back from moving forward. Now, this trap in facing the internal enemies is what I call the sucker's choice. And the way of thinking that's happening here is that I either have to give up who I aspire to be, that is, give up my values in order to get what I want, or I can get what I want, but then I have to I can live up to my values. I can be the person I want to be, but I won't be able to get the things that I want. I won't be able to achieve the outcomes that I'm looking for. So, like the other traps, this one takes the form of sort of binary thinking. And the two concepts that I play with here I call winning and success. And winning in this sense is the outcome. It's sort of what's at the end of the game. Success I define by how I play the game, right? Now, winning and success are things that we often, if we're stuck in this sucker's choice, we think we can have one or the other. And we go to really extreme thinking in this. And winning, the extreme thinking, is win at all costs, what I call cutthroat hypocrisy. An example in business would be Enron, right? Even during the time when the executives at Enron were doing some very highly unethical things, they actually produced a video talking about Enron's values and their mission. So cutthroat hypocrisy is hypocrisy of pretending like I have values when really all my values resolve to one, which is win at all costs. Right? Winning trumps every other value. Now there's an opposite extreme, which is the overuse of success. It's a little more subtle. In business, sometimes people use the term the business prevention department, and usually they're referring to somebody like legal, finance, human resources, procurement, and what they're saying, or the accusation they're making when they use this term, is that these people are focused on dogmatic, rigid rules and have completely given up the idea of doing business. Right? Because business, in a way, at its best, is the integration of winning and success. Right? We are in business because we want to succeed and reach the financial goals, take care of stakeholders, And done well, business is conducted in a way that's consistent with values. But success becomes dogmatic hypocrisy when values get codified into dogmatic rules. And the mentality is we don't care, we have the rules, we must follow the rules no matter what. Where values can be intelligently and flexibly applied. So the middle path with this, I believe, is integrity. John Wooden was the coach at UCLA and one of the most successful basketball coaches in history. Um, he had a definition of success, and remember in the very first talk I said I was going to refine the definition of success. He called success the peace of mind which is a direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing you did the best of what you were capable. So for me, you're out of integrity if you're not trying to win. If you're in business and you're not trying to achieve your business goals, then you're cheating your shareholders. But if you're in business and you're not operating in a way that's consistent with the values that you've set for yourself, then you're also out of integrity. So the question that I have, the way out of the sucker's choice, is to ask the question, am I doing my very best? And for me, my very best has two meanings. Right? It's an integration of winning and success. Am I doing my very best? Am I playing with excellence? Am I executing? Am I really striving to achieve results? And am I doing my very best in the sense of am I playing a way that I can be proud of? Am I playing the game with honor? Now, these concepts, this winning and success, I think takes a little more explanation, so let me go into it a little more deeply. So if you think about it, we have goals as human beings. And in order to achieve our goals, we choose certain behaviors, right? Those behaviors then produce results. And when the results match the goals, we typically call that winning, right? If I'm running a race, if I'm playing in sports, in business, we talk about winning a deal, right? We achieve that goal. Now, in addition to goals, though, we have something that we call purpose. And I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. An example, if I use, say, the game of tennis, I might ask you what the goal of the game of tennis is. How do you know if you win? And you'd say, well, you win more sets than the person you're playing against. The goal is to win points and win sets and then to win the match. But if I ask you the purpose of the game of tennis, depending on the person, I might get a very different answer. Some people play for social reasons. Some people play for just enjoyment. Some people play for exercise. Purpose is more highly individualized, and it's really tied to our values. In a way, you can think of there's a second side of this where purpose gets achieved when our behaviors align with our values in service of the purpose. And this is what I choose to call success. And I think this is also what John Wooden was talking about when he's talking about success. Now the question is, can you control winning? Right? Can you ensure that you win the game, that you meet your business goals? And the answer is no. And the reason is because there's outside factors that also impact the results. Right? There's the economic factors in sports, there's the other players, there's all kinds of environmental factors that can also impact your results. And therefore, winning is conditional in the sense that you don't control winning. You can influence it, certainly, but you don't control it. Now, my other question then is, well, can you control success? Since you choose your purpose, it's highly individualized. Since you choose your values and you choose your behaviors, I believe that success is unconditional. Now, I'm not proposing that in the sense winning is, or that success is better than winning. Again, I think in business, you're being hypocritical if you sacrifice either one. I think the danger is in thinking that we can only have one or the other. Now, on this learning board, there's a couple of videos that I've added, particularly around this talk. One of them is about a father and son triathlon team called Team Hoyt. Hoyt is the last name. I really encourage you to watch that because it's an interesting exploration of what I mean by this idea of winning and success and the relationship between the two of these things. Now, at the same time, so one way to look at it is that Success is the only thing I can control in this. It doesn't mean I don't strive to win. It doesn't mean that I don't think it's important, but I know that in the end, I can't control it. But who cares? So if we're in business, why do we care about this? Well, there's a couple ways to look at it that I think are quite relevant, particularly from a leadership standpoint. So one way to look at it is in terms of performance. And if you graph performance on a vertical axis and stress on a horizontal axis, we can define stress, by the way, as focus on winning. If you think about this in business, the more emphasis I put on targets and numbers, quotas, the more stress I create. And we can look at the relationship between focus on winning and actual performance. Now, when we do this, we get a curve like this. If we have no focus on winning, we get apathy. But as our focus on winning increases, we get performance increase to a certain point, after which we actually get a drop off in performance where stress gets so great that basically we begin to choke, right? We get stressed out, we get burned out, and the performance actually drops. So actually there's an optimal amount of stress that's good for performance. The idea isn't to have no stress, but the optimal amount. The question is, how do I stay, if I'm leading a team, how do I keep the team in this optimal level? Well, the way to look at it is that focus on winning moves us this way. So if my team is lackadaisical, if they're unfocused, I can increase focus on winning, external targets, quantifiable goals, and move them this way. If my team is burnt out, if they're overstressed, if I'm getting attrition, if I'm getting mistakes, the way to move them back to optimal is to focus on success, and that'll move them back into this optimal zone. And what I mean by focus on success is to focus on how they're playing the game. How are they performing in the things that they can control? So in their process and how they're working with each other, these are things that will lower stress and get us back into this optimal zone. Now, this is one of the reasons I'll say that leadership is more of an art than a science, because, well, how do I know exactly what's the mix of the focus on winning and success that's appropriate? I have to be connected with my team every day. I have to pay attention, notice behaviors. I have to know the people that I want to lead, and make continuous adjustments to keep the team here. Now, there's a second way to look at this. That's in terms of motivation. So we chart motivation here against the quantity of the motivating factor, and we'll look at 3 different motivating factors. So the first one, I'll take the obvious one first, which is fear. So fear as a motivator. It's also punishment or the threat of punishment. Now, if I have low motivation and I threaten you, I say point a gun at you, you're going to get a quick jump in motivation, right? Now, if I point a second gun or a third gun, or now I point a cannon at you, what's going to happen to the motivation? Well, what we know with fear is that very quickly, if you continue to add fear, you get a drop-off in motivation. So fear has a very short half-life. You can use it real quick, but if you don't act on it, pretty soon the person says, look, just shoot me. Just get it over with, right? So fear, and we get this, right? So this isn't a very controversial thing. So fear, not a great motivator, except in a very, very short-term way. So let's take a second one. How about reward? Well, reward, if I don't have reward and I add reward, we get a pretty steep climb. The problem with reward, and when I say reward, this could include monetary compensation. It could also include things like praise or recognition, anything that's coming from the outside. So think of extrinsic rewards. Now, with reward, you have to think about what people call the line of fairness, which means the amount of sort of reward, whether it's money, whether it's praise, that I think is fair. Below this line, you notice the curve is fairly steep. But what happens above the line, once I think I'm rewarded fairly, that curve flattens out significantly. Now, for very sort of piecemeal work, for very mechanical labor, there's still a slight upward trend. But there's some research in the last few years that actually indicates for complex cognitive tasks, there's a point where it actually starts to downturn, that we become safe. We start worrying about losing the reward. So you notice with reward, you have to have bigger and bigger increments of reward to get smaller and smaller return, and actually the return starts to drop off at a certain point because we get conservative, we get worried about losing the reward, and we know that cognitive or complex cognitive work requires creativity and freedom of thought. So the question is there anything that gives us a curve like this? Is there anything that continues to pay off? The more we get of this factor, the more motivated we get. Well, there's a proposal that there's three things. The first two are autonomy and mastery. So do we get to have control over what we're doing? And do we get to get better at stuff? Both of these are things that we find intrinsically rewarding. The more control I have and the more mastery I have over the things I'm doing, the more I tend to get motivated. But the third one is really the big one, and it's meaning. And meaning has, for me, to tie back to purpose. So it's the connection between what I'm doing to values that I hold independently of the task. So values that came from me. So if you think about this as intrinsic reward. So the way out of the sucker's choice is to integrate winning and success. In the way we do this is to ask the question, am I doing my very best? Best both meaning am I pursuing the goal with discipline and excellence, and it also means am I pursuing it with integrity and with honor. Now, if the hero is able to do this, and actually some examples of this, but before we move to the next stage, with Luke, it's a question, of he can defeat Darth Vader if he gives in to his anger and goes to the dark side. With the later movies talking about Darth Vader actually gets trapped in the sucker's choice. He believes the only way to save his wife is to go to the dark side, and he doesn't. So he has to, in a sense, give up his soul in order to get the outcome that he wants, and he thinks that it's an either or choice. And we know how that turns out, right? In other stories, this often has to do with temptation. Think about Jesus in the desert being tempted, right? You can have all of this if you'll just give up your values. Now, if the hero is able to get out of the sucker's choice, if they're able to integrate winning and success, you notice we've talked about the impact on performance, and it allows the hero to gain new capabilities, right? And this is usually in the stories the acquisition of a magical weapon. Think of Excalibur in King Arthur, or some special powers. Think of the Force. Think of in Harry Potter, his ability to use magic once he got over his own fears. Now, there can be some subtle, we talked about these traps occurring at certain points, but they can reoccur in subtle ways. At this stage in the new capabilities, there can be the knower trap coming back around, in the sense that the hero can say, well, I kind of already know how to do this. Right? They can fall into a smaller version of the knower trap. But gaining the new capabilities, they're now able to return to the world, right, back into the external world of results and actions, and they take on the external enemy. They fight the dragon. Luke fights Darth Vader, but with these new capabilities that were based in new ways of thinking, right, a higher integration as a person. They're able to defeat, usually in the story, the external enemy, which allows them to restore order. We have a big party, and we go on. Of course, this is all until next time, because really this becomes a never-ending cycle. As long as we're alive and kicking, we're going to face new opportunities, we're going to face new challenges, and we're going to move back into apparent stability and face all these things again. So that's the hero's journey. What I'd like to do as we go forward is take this into more specific tools. We've talked about the thinking and the traps that happen with thinking. As we go forward, I'll take this into some of the doing. Once we get out of these traps and we have useful ways of thinking, how do we apply those ways of thinking into freeing up some additional skills?